Hi, it's Wayne O'Keefe from howtofish.com.au, and look, we're all struggling with COVID-19. In Victoria, you can't go fishing, you can't go recreational fishing, so we're pretty much housebound. But that doesn't mean you can't do anything as far as your fishing is concerned. So I'm using this time to make up some rigs for the future so that they're already pre-tied and everything, and I just have to tie them to my main line. And I'm also making a couple of things that I didn't always have time for in the past. So it's pretty important that you use your time effectively. And look, please don't go out and do anything to cause the spread of this virus. Let's just follow the instructions we've been given. And I know it's hard. I mean, we're all struggling with this, but I think if we do the right thing, we can get there. But for this video, what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually make a homemade rod holder, but a rod holder that is easy to pack and is adjustable in length, and make it so that it looks professional and works really well. Now, what you're going to need for this is, first off, you need your base, your rod holder stem. Okay, now I use whatever I have. You could use you could cut a thin branch out of one of your trees, strip it off, a fairly straight one, and use that as a base. You want something that's strong enough to be able to push into the ground, and especially with the Australian summers being pretty dry, some of those river banks and some of the banks of the lakes and rocky areas near bay beaches may be packed. The soil might be quite packed and hard to actually push something into. So I usually go with a metal rod. You can, as I said, you can use a branch to do that, but I find a thin metal rod is fine. And I use everything that I have. So we recently threw out a clothes hanger, one of those the hangers that you put into in your bathroom, in your laundry, when you want to dry your clothes in the house. We threw that out. We got a new one, and all I did is I cut some of the stems off that, cut about 4 of them, because I know I can use them for just about anything to do with fishing, so I'm always thinking. Now, I have actually made a rod holder before where I just got a vise and I bent this. I bent this into an S shape. I had it in a previous video, and all that happened is I bent that so that it came down and came up, and that the U curve out of that S shape is where you put your rod. So that was okay, but I wanted to make something more professional, and I've done this before and it works really well. So first off, you'll need some sort of metal spike long enough so that it's at a reasonable point. This is about 70 centimeters long, which is about right. You probably push it about sort of 10 centimeters, 12 centimeters into the ground, and then you've got enough enough clearance to the top here to actually have your rod well and truly not lying on the ground. Then the other thing you've got to have is modeling clay. Now this stuff you can get at craft stores, but I've seen it I'm sure I've seen it at, I'm not sure if I saw it at a supermarket, but I think I've seen it at Bunnings and other places, and you can get it in all different colors. Okay, so it is Fimo modeling clay. Okay, and all you do is you mold it like plasticine, and then you put it in the oven. You heat it for 30 minutes, and it comes out nice and stiff and hard. And it is fantastic for making shapes that you need, that are unusual, that you couldn't normally either buy or make easily from other materials. Now, just a note on this: they come in 2 different types. They come in soft, and they come in effect. And the effect one is usually things like it's got a silver sheen to it, or it's got sparkles in it, or something that makes a nice effect. But the other one, the soft one, is easier to mold, and that's usually the one I go with. And then finally, because you're actually making the head of your rod holder, I usually try to go with a bright color, something like that. The reds, the yellows, just so it's easier to see if for some reason you dropped it into the grass around you. It will stand out so that you don't lose it. What I've decided to do today is use a yellow one. So I've unwrapped one of these, okay, and I've started to mold it into an egg shape at the moment. But what I want to do is this is going to be the rod holder head. Okay, so what I'll be doing is I'm going to mold it into a shape, a forked shape like that, with a stem on it so that it actually fits on top of that metal spike that I've got. So what you do is, I like to get it warm and molded quite easily. It's a bit like sort of stiff plasticine when you work with it, but once you get it nicely sort of warm from your hand, it makes it really quite easy to mold. So from that, what I'll do is I'll start to roll it into a more tubular shape, okay? Because what we want to do is we want to have enough space in the neck of it. You've got the fork part and you've got the neck, if you like, I'll call it the neck, which is the part that I'm going to push onto that spike. So what I'll be doing is I'm going to push that onto that to make the hole in the base of this, which will be a perfect size to fit on here. So once I've actually created this, all I have to do is stick it on here and I've got my rod holder head already set up. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm just molding it to make it long, okay? Once I feel I've got it about the right length, okay, then what I'll do is I've got to create the fork. Now what I've done usually in the past with these, because I've made a few, I usually get something round like this or something even thicker than this, and I push it, if you like, into the head of it, into the top. By pushing it in there, I cause the top of it to open up, and which is where I just got to make it big enough for a fishing rod to rest on nicely. So all I do, I just start pushing it into that, and as you can see, what I'll be doing is just as I push it in, okay, what I want to do is I'm going to cause it to spread. So it'll start to spread as it's doing here. So I'm just pushing it in there, rolling it in there, and of course it'll become misshapen, but you just basically reshape it with your hands as you're doing this, because it's like working with plasticine. And so I just do that. So as you can see, I've already pushed part of that into there, so that's where my rod will fit, but I'll make it a bigger V, a bigger fork than that, as I work this through. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time doing that, and I'll come back with what I've finished up with. Okay, so I've actually molded, I've pushed the rod down there, I've the stem down there, I've got that nice and round. That now will fit a rod perfectly, as you can see. I've actually splayed those a little bit so that leaves a reasonable gap there. And then I've got my stem. Now the stem is, as you can see, there's a bit of length to the stem. My finger is a contrast there, because I want to push the spike up to about there so that there's plenty of body, plenty of neck to hold onto that spike, so this doesn't come off easily. And look, this stuff is so forgiving. I mean, it's moldable. If you make a mistake, just mold it back into a ball again and start again. And you can make it, if you spend a bit of time, you can make it really, really perfect. So with that, and if one's not enough, I mean, buy a couple of these packets, they're not expensive, and you can put two together to make something a bit bigger and bulky if you fish with big rods. But because I'm fishing mainly with lighter rods and that, for this one anyway, that's what it will look like. Now, the next part of that is, okay, so we've got the fork done, is to insert the spike. What I do with these things is once I've actually, if I get the piece of metal I like, then I'll sharpen one end. Okay, I just use a file or an angle grinder, and I'll just put a bit of a point on there so that goes into the earth easily. And the other end, well, you could do it for both to make it pass through this better, but it doesn't really matter. So as long as one end, the end that goes into the soil, is got a bit of a point on it, that's fine, and because it'll then go in so much easier. Okay, so there we go. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to push this in. I'm going to make sure it pushes in straight so that when we finish up, that will sit on there perfectly, and have probably about that much, let's say that much of the spike going up the neck. So that's the next thing I'll do. I'll just push these up here, and I'll just be really careful to try and get it in the center and straight. So just before I started, I pushed it down onto a flat surface so that I made the base of that quite flat. And then I started pushing the spike up there. And what I'm doing all the time is, as I'm putting it up there, what I'm doing is I'm just watching it. I keep rotating to make sure that it's straight and is nicely in the center. So I'm just rotating this, pushing, 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 and that way I'll get it nicely in the center so that it looks good, but also I don't create a weakness by putting it too close to the edges where it might break. Although this stuff is quite strong, I must admit. So I just keep doing that until I get it to the right depth. Okay, so once I feel that I've got it about right, okay, all I do is I'll squeeze the stem a little bit. What I want to do is I just want to make sure that it is fairly tight to the spike. The reason being, it'll be, once I heat this, it doesn't shrink when you heat it. So once I basically put this into the oven for that 30 minutes to harden it, what will happen is then this won't come off easily. It'll go on, but it won't be really too loose. So all I'm doing is I'm just making sure it's got a snug fit, not so snug I can't get it off, but certainly a snug fit so that it'll stay on there and doesn't rattle around, which means then it's not going to come off. I could put this on the ground and this thing won't come off. So all I do is just squeeze out a little bit to get that right. Once I've done that, this is ready to go in the oven, and I'll just give you an idea of how deep it is. Okay, so on the side there, if I pull this out now, okay, so I've put it in that far. Okay, so it's got plenty of space in the head, and plenty of space in the rod holder head to actually hold on to this. The next thing I do now, I'm just going to put this on a baking pan or just a tray. I'll put a little bit of foil, silver foil, baking foil, down on the pan first, because this stuff probably has oils and things like that I don't want my wife to find out about. So I'll put this down on a baking pan in the oven at 110 degrees centigrade or Celsius for 30 minutes. But look, it has those instructions up here, just there, on these anyway, so you know what to do. Okay? Now what I'm trying to do is just replace adjustable rod holders that I have. This particular rod holder has a head that unscrews. This has got different sections in it for moving your rod. So when you cast out, this is specifically for quiver tipping. You cast out, you might put your rod in the center, and then over time you might just want to get a bit more bend in the rod, so you move it away from where you've cast to. And by doing that, you're just getting that little bit more bend in the rod. And I mean, these things, it's fairly elaborate. Most people don't need them. This thing can unscrew, and then I can put in another head like that, which is pretty much similar to what we are making at the moment. So I take this off to screw this in. This is the other head that fits in there. Okay, and so this thing is adjustable. So this is about, I think this is about 70 centimeters long, but it has two parts. This one actually comes out. So you can actually make that in total probably about 1.5 meters long. And what it does, it adjusts, you just screw that there, that tightens it up so that you've got quite a bit of length of rod holder with this pointed end to push into the soil. Got to tell you though, I mean, this probably, with those two heads on, it's probably worth about $50. And in that really hard soil, I find that this is, because it's quite thick, still hard to get in. Whereas when you've got something thinner like that, they're easier to get in. Okay, so what I was trying to do is replicate this as cheaply as I possibly could. So I'll just show you something that I prepared earlier and have been using for years. Before going to Queensland some years ago, I wanted to make something that would fit into my my luggage and was simple to carry around. So I made this thing here. Okay, now first off, I'll show you. That is the head that I've made previously. That comes off this central spike here. That there, I've had this for years. I made that. I've got about probably for this one, because I was using a heavier rods in Queensland, I think that's got 2 packs of that clay, or that craft clay in it that I've made that from. And I've got a fairly stiff spike here. Okay, so that that fits on nicely and snugly. It doesn't come off easily, and therefore it won't fall off, because I've dropped this a couple of times. Then the other thing that I've done is I've got it so that I put some Velcro on it and have another rod holder there as well. The reason I did that is because I want to, at times, be able to have a fairly long rod holder. That there that's 60 centimeters long, that central spike. If I push them together, that central spike is 60 centimeters. But when I put the two of them together, I got 120 centimeters. And all I did to make them adjustable is put some Velcro on it. So what I'll do with this is, if I want to make this very, very long, I'll use the first spike as the base, okay? And I'll push this other spike, this other rod holder that I had made years ago, I can pull that up, and the Velcro actually holds. I've got 3 pieces of Velcro on there. That holds it fairly tightly, which means that you can then extend that, okay, and it makes it much longer. So I've got all of that, as you can see, right? And all I've done it to make it adjustable is got this Velcro, and the Velcro, I think I got it either at a $2 shop or Bunnings or something, and it just comes in strips. I cut it out and made up Velcro strips on it. Those 3 together hold that quite high, as you can see. Give you a bit more spin, okay? And that's holding it out of the water. So when I was fishing up there, I was fishing into the estuaries at Broadbeach. So I wanted my rod high so I could keep as much line as possible out of the water. That worked really, really well. At other times, I wanted to have 2 rod holders, which I do. I've got this and that, and you could make a head for this one. If this was just a straight piece of metal, I could have made a head for this as well. Just keep that. And then what I'll do is I'll put my head on this, okay, and I'll have either, if I've got 2 rods, I've got 2 rod holders, or I'll have this at the front. This is the back, so I can keep my rod flat. And if you've seen some of my videos, I'll have, if the water's not moving fast at all, and what I'll often do is I'll have my rod flat down, not high, flat down, so that if there's a bit of wind about, then the wind doesn't muck around with the line and the rod tip as much as it does if it's quite high. So I've got 2. So it's quite versatile. Okay, well, I've now taken this out of the oven, and just be careful. It stays hot for quite a while. You probably need to leave it for about 15 minutes for it to cool down so you can handle it properly. So it is now nice and hard. And so now just insert it. That's nice. It's nice and stiff on the top there, so it won't fall off if I drop this. And I have my rod holder all made. So simple. And you know, these things work very well. You can see it's got quite a bit of space in there, so even for if I put it at the other end of the stem of this top section, easily fits that, so you can fit a bigger rod onto that. And that easily goes in the ground. And when I was talking about sharpening it before, look, if you don't have too many tools, I mean, I used a pair of bolt cutters to actually cut this off the clothes dryer. But you know, there's always ways of getting it off. You'd always, I guess, bend it off, break it off that way. But if you don't have too many tools, one thing you can do to sharpen that is just to drag that along some cement, like the path. Your neighbours might wonder what the hell you're doing, but you could actually just have it down on the path and just drag it backwards. You know, just walk backwards, and what you'll do is it'll actually start to take any of the rough edges off that and start to curve it into a bit more of a point. So there you go. Easy to do, and something you can do at home. Buy these things online. I mean, I have no affiliation with the company that makes these things, but I just found that they're great to work with, and I'm sure that there are other things you could do with this, and I'm thinking lures might be another one. So if you've done anything, please let us know. If you've made anything before, we want to hear too. So it's quite versatile what you can do. I thoroughly recommend you taking some time to make these. It's a bit of fun to play with. I mean, who doesn't like playing with plasticine at school, and you come up with some pretty good objects, and I'm sure there'll be other stuff you could do. So if you've done things like this, please comment below. Let us know what you've made before. Let's all share in some of the things we can do while we are kept isolated like this, and what we can then do. And if you'd like to send me a post, I can put pictures up in the next video just of some of the things we've done, some of the things that have been made, so that everybody can share in that. So look, if you've liked this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you need information on many things on fishing tips, etc., go to my website, howtofish.com.au. Stay safe.